Hi, I'm here, and I've got MrSpeakers Aeon Flow Open. And open we shall. So this is a bit different from the... I've already done the Aeon Flow. Now the open version should be interesting because there should be more or less a mini pair of MrSpeakers Ether Flows with any luck. New case. Now this is a bit different from the brown case of before. It looks a bit nicer, a little bit... Still fairly hard, but looks prettier. Not 100% sure of the materials, but we can check. So, thanks very much to the local distributor in Japan, Emilai, who's lent this pair to me, and I've got to give these back. So, oops, we're upside down. This is bizarre. They're sitting underneath. Upside down, I don't know how that works. But anyway, so compared to our good old MrSpeakers Eons, now this is, I don't know if they have, this is exactly how they look if you actually buy them, because this is one of their demo pairs. But you can see here, we can see foam in the back there of the open back grill. But otherwise they're identical. So they have the still nitinol headband. So if you've ever had braces, you've had this stuff in your teeth. And the basic slidey, very tight slidey in this one, which you can adjust with a screw. And the basic chunky leather headband. And this funky angle design that's designed to... Funky angle design and really thick, chunky and soft pads, and they've obviously been sitting in here for a while. So again, this is a demo pair, so if there's a bit of weirdness such as with the pads, this is because it's not a new pair. And the usual connectors, the Hirose connectors, which are really nice and snap on and off really well. So now, what's in the box? The cable. Dan Clark did a good cable to begin with these Eons, and so he's continued on with this, except of course the portable versions, as well as the usual left and right mark, have a removable plug for the Aeon and Aeon Flow. So that's where we start with these. And so just to give you a comparison, I have the Aeon Flow sitting here, which I'm going to compare. Which way around are we going? This way? Carbon fiber, I guess that looks called carbon fiber, look, whichever, I'm not sure, versus open back, but otherwise pretty much identical. So let's have a listen. It's probably no surprise to find that the Aeon Flow Opens share much in terms of presentation with their proverbial older brother, the Ether Flows. Now, the Ether Flows and the Aeon Flows have something of a fairly neutral presentation, what I'd call listening neutral, which means a little bit of a boost in the mid-bass to give some body to the music. Now, starting with the original Ethers, that bass kind of rolled off a little bit in the deep bass, so MrSpeakers provided inserts, as they have inserts in here, and that helped improve the lower bass response. Same thing happened with the original Eons. They had a bit of a roll-off in the deep bass, but the inserts, as well as improving the low bass, it kind of took the edge off the treble. Now, the treble I thought was spot on in general, but that means that the treble ends up with these and all the other MrSpeakers cans. Once you put the inserts in it, it kind of reduces it maybe a little bit too much for taste. Now, recently I've been listening with the Campfire Audio Cascades, and with the inserts in there, that reduces the treble somewhat as well, so I've got kind of used to it. But some people, maybe if you listen to classical music, maybe you want just a tiny bit more zing in the treble, and maybe you'll find that these headphones in general from MrSpeakers maybe are a tad muffled with the inserts in there, and I took the inserts out of my Ether Flows for that reason. But for people who listen to more modern music where there's more of a peaky treble, you more want the bass rumble, then the inserts are going to make them kind of spot on. They don't give the kind of bass rumble that you sometimes really want with music, where the very bass boosted cascades can help. But they do give a list presentation that is what I call a safe suggestion for buying you might call these entry-level high-end headphones for someone who's maybe scaling up from the... I get a lot of questions, people asking if they're about scaling up from the Sennheiser HD650, or now they've been all over Massdrop for years and years, and many thousands of pairs sold the HD6XX. And so these I definitely would call entry-level high-end. And I say that because while maybe the presentation isn't quite as wide as the MrSpeakers Ethers, the MrSpeakers Ethers are kind of out here in the very left and right, and you get this wide space. The Aeon Flow Open tends to be a bit more closed in and a bit more around you, closer in around you, but it's still pretty wide and still pretty open in that sense. And it's not as closed as the closed back models, as funny as that sounds to say that. The closed back model doesn't have as much bass, and they can just tend to sound very studio monitor-ish in comparison after listening with the open models. And if I listen to something like the Cascades and it feels like they don't have any bass at all. When it comes to driving the MrSpeakers Aeon Flow Opens, even though their specs suggest they need some power, they're 16 ohms, their sensitivity is a little bit below, 100 dBs, which would be ideal for using with portable gear, they still drive pretty well even out of fairly simple stuff like the Blue Wave Get, which is only 135 milliwatts, which, can't provide a lot of power to it, a lot of control over the bass, but it can do a good job. Where they do definitely scale up with better gear. I've had a fair number of new adapts here which will drive these easily. We've got the IFI's new XDSD. This was a good match because its peak power output is at 16 ohms, so this ended up being a really good match. But the Aeon Flow Opens did scale up, just like the Cascades scaled up. I could really make out the difference when I started jumping up to the big amps here. I've got SoundAware's P1 here, the IFI Pro ICANN, and we have the AudioVal Solaris, Audio GD Master 9 and Studio 6, and you really notice a difference in the driving capability, even with these being under $1,000. So I definitely call these a pair of entry-level high-end cans. They're not quite as spacious sounding as the Ether Flows, they're not quite as detailed as a pair of Utopias, but they get so much most of the way there that unless you're listening to really good quality music, I call these a great pair of cans for jumping up from something like Sennheiser's HD650, the HD6XX on Mass Drop, and other cans above that price range. I've got the AKG K7XX sitting out here, and these are a massive jump up from those. Also, I think another pair of, speaking of Mass Drop, another pair of cans that they've been selling have been the LX, which I reviewed earlier. They're very, very similar to the LX in terms of presentation, the tonality in general. It's very little in it between them. The advantage that the LX have is that they are genuine full-size pair of headphones. These are a bit narrower front to back, so the soundstage can be a little bit narrower. Now, sometimes people do ask me about aftermarket cables with headphones, so to answer that, I found the stock cable perfectly fine. It's comfortable, it does the job, it's well made. I think it's only really necessary to upgrade if you want a particular connection which Dan Clark doesn't provide, say like the new Pentacon connector. Now, I did try a Moon Audio Silver Dragon on these as I already own one, and I found it did make a little bit of an improvement in kind of spaciousness and the level of detail. It was only a small difference, and I find that listening with a stock cable is perfectly fine. So once again, I think a really fantastic pair of cans from Dan Clark. I mean, the funny thing about these is that they're so good and they scale up so well. It's kind of hard to say, someone's going to ask, is it worth buying the MrSpeakers Ether Flows after, listening with these? And I'd kind of say, if I was buying them for myself now, I'd just buy these and not go with the Ether Flows because they're so close and you only lose, you lose so little, maybe a bit of soundstage for the most part, especially with most music. That and they'll power out of stuff really easily. That overall, something like this, one of your portable devices like this or a Chord Mojo, that would make a really great piece of a really great system, even just for home listening, for traveling listening. Although you do lose obviously some isolation having the open back system there. Just as a general listening rig, I really enjoyed these. Actually, one of the funny combinations I got was, like they're all called Hugo here. Now you can probably find these for under $1,000 and what have you. Being that this is has a presentation which people call a bit brighter, or a bit kind of more open and airy, is probably more accurate. These combined with a slightly warmer sound of the MrSpeakers cans made for a really nice combination. Actually, I was listening with this setup with my phone and I was really enjoying it. So, as a pair of entry-level high-end cans, these do a really fantastic job, and I could actually see a lot of people just buying these and just stopping there because unless you listen to really highly detailed music, you're really not going to get much benefit from even vastly more expensive cans. Thanks for watching the video. Before you go, did you know that my videos are entirely supported by people like you? For the equivalent of buying me a coffee once in a while, you'll get to see the rough cuts in advance. You can also interact with me on chat or email me for advice or generally interact with the little community we have going of Patreon supporters. Head over to patreon.com/Currawong for more information. Also, there'll be written reviews of this product on my website, which you can access easily at here.reviews. And if you don't want to sign up to be a patron, you can also support my videos by buying your headphones through the links on the sidebar. And in doing so, you'll help support independent reviews. Anyway, thank you very much, and I'll see you online.